Hello, and welcome to Crossing Bridges. Ladies and gentlemen, today my guest is Paul Huang, a sensational rising star and a virtuoso as an international concert violinist. The Washington Post wrote about Paul Huang that he has all the tools to truly make concert violinist a career, and he has already passed that expectation. And not only Washington Post has written, but many other top-notch newspapers throughout the United States have also made tremendous accolades about this young man. He has performed in many countries and delighted audiences throughout the world. Today, it's my pleasure to have Paul appearing on my show. You'll find out more about him, and at the conclusion of the show, he will honor us by performing a piece. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Paul Huang to my show. Paul,
Nice to meet you.
thank you so much
Thanks
for coming
having
on the
me.
show. It's
Thanks
my
for having
pleasure. As I indicated, truly, I've heard you perform, and you are really a rising, shining star in the world of international concert violin. And audiences that have already had the pleasure of listening to you are fortunate. And I know millions of people are still awaiting and will get a chance to see this young man who's seated to my right to perform to the delights. But I want today for the audiences to have a more understanding of who Paul Huang is. I know you were born in Taiwan and you started taking violin lesson at the age of 7. If you'd be so kind, Paul, who was instrumental in directing you by taking violin lessons?
Well, it's very interesting. Both of my parents are not musically inclined, and but music is always around the house. And I remember back in the days where CD is still popular, and
Right.
and so in every of our room back in home in Taiwan, we will have a CD player. And one of my greatest hobby and one of my greatest joy is we collect a lot of CDs and classical CDs. And my hobby is to every week I would pick different recordings in different rooms. And this week I want the Bach Goldberg variations in this room, in the living room, and then I will have to have the Brahms violin sonatas in my bedrooms. So music is always around the house. And for me, music is something very natural to me. And in fact, I actually started the piano lessons earlier. I started piano when I was 4, and that's how my music training started it. But not really particularly to have a pursuit of a musical career or whatnot. It's just really a hobby. But I do remember, actually, interestingly, my parent told me that when they took me apparently to a violin lesson when I was 3.5 or 4, before the piano lessons, and I have no recollections at all, of course. And apparently I hated the violin. And after the first lesson, because after the first lesson, we hold up the violin so weirdly, and everything is just so unnatural, and then you just never make good sounds at all anyway. So I think I told my parents that I don't want the violin. I hate the violin. I don't want to learn violin. And my parents were not forcing at all on anything. And I said, oh, fine, we'll just play piano. So that kind of delayed my studies in violins. And until I was 7, I actually still do remember going to concerts in my hometown. And in fact, violin recitals. And I was just so amazed by this, low wooden box that can project, through this amazing, thousands hall and without any amplifications. And I just enjoy the presence on stage. And immediately after the concert, I knew that this is something that I wanted to do. And in one life, there's always this kind of moment when things just happen.
Absolutely.
And things click. And I think that's one of the moments that I decided I wanted to play the violin.
Well, it was a blessing moment because you have really brought joys to so many people. And as I indicated, there are still millions of people are waiting to hear your magnificent performance. When you were in Taiwan, once you began your piano, of course, then violin lessons, you won so many awards. And I recall from hearing stories that the judges in Taiwan said you cannot win any more trophies or prizes. You need to leave Taiwan and go someplace else. So tell us at what time and age you left from New York to go to New York and be accepted in Juilliard, and what are some of the qualifications that Juilliard, one of the prestigious music schools in the world, accepts a student?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's very kind of you to say that. It, it is true that, I mean, Taiwan is a fairly small country, and so there aren't that many not that many competitions for violin anyway. So so I won of course the national violin competition when I was 12, and but my parents were very conservative about having me to study abroad, because that means that the family has to split, and that is a big change for my family. And so my parents were not so sure about that, and especially I was so young back then. So they waited and waited and waited. And when the teacher always says, "Oh, you have to take Paul to the United States or to Europe to studies," they always kind of just, this year goes in, that year goes out, and so that waited a few years, and until one year my teacher called up my parents, and that means it's something serious, because teacher doesn't really call parents, and so she really emphasized that she's not joking, and she really meant that Paul needs to go somewhere else to study, and Taiwan is not enough for his musical pursuit. And so then when that this subject came up, so my teacher recommended me to audition for Juilliard, because she was a Juilliard graduate herself. So she says, that's the only school that I know, and it so happens to be one of the very top music conservatories around the world, and they have a pre-college program where they accept students before college,
Right.
and as young as 7 or 8. As long as you qualify, you're playing. You can just go in when you're 7 or 8. So I did the audition, and luckily I got in. So that's how I came to the United States and to study in New York.
Now, briefly, for the viewing audiences, who many of them are music lovers, expand regarding how many hours a day, on average, you have been practicing since you were 7 years old.
Well, I really don't know, because I never wanted to tell myself that how many hours I should practice every day, because every day is different,
Right.
and the life of a musician, it's so varied, and to be very honest, I think about practice more than I actually practice. I'm sure nobody likes to practice, but I do what I can, and I set goals for myself every day. So
Right.
I need to achieve A, B, and C, and so however the time takes, that would be it. So, and usually it's about 4 or 5 hours per
Like,
day.
for example, when you are performing with orchestra, which you have done so many throughout the world, take one example, the one you perform in your native country, Taiwan. How many hours would you perform or practice to get ready for your performance?
Each performance, I always think of it as, what happened if this is my very last performance? And I really give my very best for every concert that I give. And for concertos, a lot of them I've learned when I was younger, and it's something that I already know. And so when the concert comes, usually about like half a year ago, I start picking up the pieces again and just start reviewing and revisit the piece. And for musicians, revisiting music is something very important, because you live with the music, and you actually discover more every time you come back to a piece. And it's like a great piece of art when you come back and then visit and visit, and again, you always discover something new.
Right.
Yeah. So.
You have competed in a number of competitions throughout the world, and it's a joy for a young rising artist such as yourself to look forward and compete and win. You have won 2 first prizes that comes to my mind. The first one in 2009, you won the international competition in violin, and it was Sion Ballet in Switzerland. Then in 2011, you won the Young Concert Artist International Auditions, first prize again. Can you expand on those 2? What was the joy and the high and low that you had before and after?
Well, honestly, there is no joy in competitions, you know. And first of all, I really don't. I'm not a big competition person, as opposed to some other people who likes to do competitions, because I really think music is not to judge. You cannot judge music for that, 30 minutes, judging a person and say, okay, you're better than the other person, because it really is an evolution. It's a development.
Right.
And but for competition, I guess it is necessary for young musicians, because that really gives you some credit for your musical career. So I did quite a few, and as just like any other people, and luckily I won some of them, and there's really no joy for me to doing competitions, except because of competition that you push yourself, you learn much more repertoire required for the competition.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's very helpful and it's very useful. But the stress of going to competition is something that I don't think anyone would enjoy.
I'm sure. Well, you're very modest, because when we talk about competitions international-wise, you're talking about hundreds of violinists come from all over the world, and they're some of the best. And for you to win the first prize, that is an honor, and you should be congratulated, even though, as I indicated, I realize what you're saying regarding music. Really, everyone has talent who enters into world of music, but also it is a kind of a nice thing for you to have on your bio, and at the same time for yourself. To say, I went through all this stress, I did practice so much, and I won. And it's a joy, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess one more joy that I can actually think of is that you actually meet so many great musicians in competitions, because if they are qualified for competition, they're usually some of the very best from their countries. So it's really a good chance for you to learn. It's really a learning process for me, and then you learn what they play, how they play, and then hopefully you learn something from them. And for me, that is a joy.
Also, as a musician, especially with all due respect at a young age, the more support you have from family and friends, the easier it becomes on your mind to concentrate in your music. I've had the pleasure, of course, knowing your parents and family, and you're really, truly blessed to have parents who unconditionally are devoted to you and love you, and as well as your family members. And they're always there by your side. They're always there for you, which I know, knowing you, it gives you a tremendous joy and relaxation. Can you expand on that for a few minutes, please?
Sure, yes. Family is very important to me. I talk to my family a great deal, and for me, that is something that is very comforting for me, and especially a traveling musicians that you go to city and city. One might get lonely at some times, and only the closest friend and families, they are there with you all the time, and then you actually can share with them what you're going through. And if you go to a city where you see a beautiful church and you see a beautiful landscape, first thing you wanted to share is to share with your friends and family. And for me, that is very important.
And for a long time, while you were growing up, of course, you're still growing up, your parents would take turns living in New York with you, basically, which was a great, again, asset by knowing you have either mom or dad to go home to. And that inspired you a lot. That's correct?
Yes. It really gave me a lot of securities, especially for a 13-year-old. From the smallest city in Taiwan to the biggest city in the world, that is quite a change. And I still remember when I first came to New York when I was 13, seeing all these huge buildings and not even seeing the skies, which I'm so not used to. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And all the noises and all that, and it is frightening for a 13-year-old, I must say. But luckily, I have my mom or my dad with me sometimes when I'm in New York. So I'm not really lonely by myself, as opposed to there are some people who came to the United States just by themselves and having a guardian only. And in that sense, I'm very lucky.
I can associate with you, because when I came to this country, I was 13 and a half by myself.
Yeah.
But I was excited, because going from Iran to USA was like going to the moon.
Yeah.
And of course, that hype actually lasted for me for a long, long time with variation, but I exactly associate with your feeling. What was the first concert, if you recall, that you performed with an orchestra and what country?
Well, it will probably have to be in Taiwan. Probably when I was 12 or 13, before I came to the United States of America. It was, I think I won the young competitions with the Taipei Symphony Orchestras, where I performed with them at the National Concert Hall in Taiwan. And that was a very big moment for me.
I'm sure.
For what I've learned so far. And that was a very memorable concert. And I still remember my teacher was in the audience as well. And that's something that I treasure very much. And
what other countries, briefly, you have competed that you haven't gone yet, basically? I know you have competed in Taiwan, you have competed in Seoul, Korea, you have competed in a number of European countries. Can you name some of those European countries?
Well, I have never done that many competitions.
Mm-hmm.
So
performing, I'm not.
I mean performance. Yeah, I've played just about everywhere, I guess. Asia, I come back to Asia very often, and I go to Korea, China, Japan, and of course my home country, Taiwan. You know, usually at least once per season, and I play quite a few in Europe. You know, I was just in London, Paris, and Germany, Switzerland, of course, and then also I'm making my Spain debut this November with the Bilbao Symphony, which I'm very excited and look very much forward to that. And in the United States, yeah, New York, Washington D.C., Chicago. Yeah.
You also will be going to Mexico City, is that correct?
I have been.
You have been there.
In fact, yeah, I have been going to Mexico City for the past consecutive 4 or 5 years, and I played quite a few times with their national symphonies, and also with their festivals there.
I see.
With the Mineria Festival, and so yeah, Mexico City is something I'm also pretty close with, and I really enjoy going to Mexico City. Yeah.
If you were giving some advice to a young musician who was at your age right now, what would you be telling that person about how to go about pursuing his or her dream of achieving to some level as to what you have?
You mean my age right now?
Yes, someone you're talking to, a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, what would you tell him?
Well, I think first of all, passion. Passion is very important. If you know what you're doing, and if you really love music, and passion keeps you go very far. And because of course you have to have a discipline and putting up with so many hours of practicing.
Right.
Without passion, I don't think one can ever do that. So passion is very important. Discipline is very important. Of course, talent. And but I always believe talent is only 20%, and 80% is hard work. And luck.
Right.
So yeah, I would say those 3.
Actually, music is really the soul of a human being. And we were talking before we went on the air that countries that instill in the young people to not only get a good education, but also learn music, inspires them to become better individuals from the standpoint of memory training, doing better in school, but as a whole, the community and the city and the country becomes in a happier place. It seems to be, in my opinion, going to a number of European countries who, for example, music is just in the air, especially classical music.
Yeah.
Even though the United States has a number of classical stations, but is not as advanced in that level as European countries.
Yeah, it's really true what you're mentioning, and in a way, very sad that the music educations in public schools now around the country is diminishing and cutting down quite a bit. And for me, that is not a luxury. For me, music education is a necessity, even more so, if not more important than any other subjects. And so what I would like to do, I mean, now whenever I go to different cities, I try, if I have time, I try to go to public schools and to schedules like sessions,
Right.
and just to introduce them how great classical music can be. And very often, after the performance or whatever the Q&A sessions, they I can see the smiles on their face, and then they discover something they've never seen before, but so interesting,
Absolutely.
so fascinating. And I think classical music, it's not something that's an instant pleasure. And in our day, in this our day and age where everything's so fast,
Sure, sure.
classical music is not instant. It's an acquired taste.
Absolutely.
And it does needs a little bit of training, but not so much. And so, I mean, I spend a great deal of hours at airports, and whenever I'm at airport, I'm always carrying my fiddle, of course. And so people always say, "Oh, is that a guitar? Is that a cello or something?" So, so I always grab the chance to communicate with whoever I encountered,
Absolutely.
and to tell them how great classical music can be. And people somehow would often ask me and say, "Oh, how do you do so?" Well, I said, well, Vivaldi Four Seasons is the perfect example of that. If I tell anyone on the street, if I just hum the opening tune of the Spring, people would recognize because it's also in the ringtones of in the cell phones now. And so I can just start from there and tell them and say, look, Vivaldi Four Seasons is a Baroque music for violin and ensemble. And it depicts birds, streams, and all kinds of natures that you can imagine through sounds.
Right.
And that really encourages them to think pictorially.
Excellent.
And then so they have a better idea of what music can be. It's not just a vague, this kind of high-class music,
Right.
which is so not true.
Paul, it's a great honor to have on my show because I would love to spend so many hours with you to the delight of audiences, but I know you're going to be performing for not only my pleasure, which I'm honored, as well as the viewing audience, and I know you're going to be expanding as to what the piece is. So if you'd be so kind, without any further ado, let me first of all say thank you so much for honoring me on this show. And I know the viewing audience who are watching today are going to be seeing you on stages after stages throughout the world, and they're going to say, I'm so lucky I watched Paul Huang on Nat Nadar's show on this day. So thank you so much, and the stage is yours, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you for having me.
My
So the piece
pleasure.
that I will be playing is John Corigliano, the great American composer. He wrote the Red Violin Caprices. It's from the film, The Red Violin, actually, and he revised the soundtrack for solo violin. And it really depicts a journey of a violin that over the centuries. So in the very beginning, you will hear this kind of almost like a hymn-like tune. And in the middle sections, you will hear this kind of gypsy violinist. And at the end, the composer is depicting of this virtuoso, almost like a Paganini, playing crazy virtuosic stuff, and that ends the whole piece. So I hope you enjoy.
Bravo. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please, thank you. You honored me, and it was truly delightful. I will never more forget this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's such a variation and talent that you have that shows through your passion, as you indicate, for music, and is really a God gift to you. And thank you so much for sharing that with everyone else that was watching today. And I know that